Beautiful people get it better. That's just the way it is.
Is beauty objective or subjective? It's an age-old debate that seems to never end. And when it does end, the usual conclusion is that beauty, at least when it comes to physical outer beauty in humans, is subjective. We're all beautiful in our own way. And beauty is subject to various factors like time, culture, and up to an individual's opinion. According to my viewer survey for this video, more than 70% of the 559 answers declared that beauty, as well as ugliness, is subjective. But some would argue that beauty and ugliness is an objective truth, and that these platitudes don't mean anything. Sure, they sound nice, and maybe we can even get behind the idea that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but ugliness is just an objective fact. Some people are just ugly, period. And I think it's easy to fall into this trap, and many do, of saying, yes, beauty is subjective, but ugliness definitely exists, because that way we can say, at least we're not ugly. But ultimately, working within the framework of objective ugliness and subjective beauty is harmful, because by giving ugliness legitimacy, it not only reinforces this idea of objective beauty, but it also helps uphold ableism by creating a category of objectively ugly people. In the US, from the late 1860s until the 1970s, several American cities had ugly laws making it illegal for persons with unsightly or disfiguring disabilities to appear in public. As one responder wrote, I think beauty is somewhat more flexible in people's minds because people are attracted to different things, but what is considered ugly is very tied up in white supremacist, ableist, and anti-fat beliefs. In the end, I've personally become dissatisfied with this debate that can so easily devolve into having our cake and eating it too. Of saying beauty is subjective, but ugliness isn't, because when you say ugliness isn't subjective, then that also means beauty isn't subjective either. A debate in which we can acknowledge some people's humanity, but not others. Or when the lesson is good, there's more to people than their appearance, but then they miscast the disabled and disfigured characters. Watch Sarah's video essays on this topic that delve deeper into this pattern. And in general, being okay with objective ugliness means that we're okay with insulting someone's appearance because it's just a fact. And I personally just don't think that's right, even if the person who's receiving the insult is a bad person, because it further normalizes this idea of objectivity. And honestly, today, it seems like that narrative is being pushed more and more, that beauty and ugliness are just objective, unchanging truths. With millions of dollars going into the study of neuroaesthetics and trying to find an objective beauty center in the brain, to social media discourse about pretty privilege and the rise of the conservative online right, mainly backlash against widening the definition of beauty, there seems to be more people believing that beauty is objective than ever before. So in this video, we're going to delve into why corporations and some individuals are so invested in the idea of objective beauty and objective ugliness, even though most of us agree that beauty is subjective, as well as discuss the different ways we cope with an objective beauty hierarchy, how we shouldn't conflate objective beauty with a beauty ideal or standard, and lastly talk about inner beauty and divesting from beauty as an objective fact. And before we start, this video is mainly shaped by my own experiences, so I would like to thank the 561 survey responses that helped shape this video further and helped me reach beyond my own scope and my own perspective. I couldn't have made this video without you, so thank you so much for taking the time to participate. So without further ado, let's go.
For who could ever learn to love a beast?
It seems as though we would all benefit from a society that truly believes beauty is subjective and that no matter what you look like on the outside, you still matter. Or perhaps a society that doesn't place someone's value on what they look like and just accepts people for who they are regardless of appearance. And 93% of you said that you find more comfort in beauty as subjective than objective. As one responder wrote, I find more comfort in subjective beauty because I don't have the energy to enter this rat race. Another wrote, I take comfort in the notion that if I just wear what I like, eventually it'll be trendy again, perhaps even ahead of the curve. Another answer reads, I really don't think any beauty standard should exist because that would still contribute to the notion that beauty is objective. And one commenter took a more ambivalent approach. I didn't answer the question about finding comfort in objective or subjective beauty standards because I do not find either one particularly comforting or upsetting. Others wrote how beauty as objective is a social construct that is enforced by patriarchy and white supremacy. One commenter said, speaking as a fat black femme, beauty standards are so focused on white ideals that I can't participate in beauty trends. Too big of a stomach for the flat-stomached Y2K trend, but too small of a butt for the slim thick Kardashian look. Another wrote, While I'm sure more BIPOC representation in media over the past 2 decades has helped shift the construct of white supremacy, it is still clear that whiteness is seen as the standard. Even black features on white people are generally more preferred than black features on black people. We still have a long way to go. One responder commented, "I'm a half Filipino and half Korean girl who currently lives in the Philippines. Other than body types, the thought of being white has always plagued me ever since I was a child. It seemed that being white was factored into beauty standards. My mom, a Filipina, was plotting the age I needed to start using skin whitening products even though I possess a light skin tone. As I aged, it seemed that people around me had slowly accepted diversity in skin color and finding beauty with darker skin beauty. Although that may be the case, I can't help but feel pressured to still attain a lighter skin complexion given my East Asian background." In the end, I and most agree that a world where beauty wasn't tied up with self-worth and didn't have any bearing on how people treated you or how you saw yourself was best. A world where beauty could be determined outside of white supremacy, patriarchy, and ableism. But before we get into beauty as a social construct, let's first look into the philosophy and neuroscience that backs up this idea that beauty is objective. Arguments for beauty as an objective truth that you either possess or don't possess can be tied to your facial symmetry, the golden ratio, how healthy you appear, etc. As some respondents put it, there is some truth to objective beauty in that humans specifically thought people with less symmetrical faces were ugly because way in the past, that was an indicator of poor health. A lot of beauty standards are built on what's quote-unquote healthy looking. And I put healthy looking in quotes because what's healthy is subjective to each person depending on who they are. Even though the healthy look, as dictated by media and corporations, is usually a mix of slim fit. Another wrote, "Look at history and you will see that beauty is very subjective. That being said, there are certain traits, fewer than we think but they still exist, that are likely inherently beautiful to humans. For example, symmetry." So with this argument, these biological inherent calculable traits can unquestioningly lead to an objective beauty standard, traits that make people just more pleasing to look at than others, that can span time periods, cultures, and some believe are hardwired into our brains. In the paper, "Is Beauty in the Eye of the Beholder or an Objective Truth? A Neuroscientific Answer" by Dr. Hassan Alim, Maria Pombo et al. From Georgetown University, they write, "In Europe, from the 6th century BC until the 18th century CE, most philosophers fell into the objectivist camp. For example, both Plato and Aristotle held that things were beautiful if they respected certain mathematical forms. Later in the Middle Ages, Augustine argued that things gave delight because they were beautiful, not the other way around. The philosophers and artists of the Renaissance extended these classical principles, placing beauty in mathematical properties of objects like proportions, perspective, symmetry, and compositional geometry. It was not until the end of the 17th century that philosophers such as Locke, Hume, and Kant started to think of beauty in a more subjective manner. Locke, for instance, pointed out that experiencing color, a major aspect of beauty, was unique to the individual. In turn, Hume, one of the biggest proponents of the subjectivist view, wrote, "Beauty of things exists merely in the mind which contemplates them." In recent years, the field of neuroaesthetics has seen significant growth. Increasingly, neuroscientists are beginning to use modern tools to see whether they can give insight into the age-old question of beauty. In their paper, they argue that beauty may not be the direct result of objective mathematical properties as once thought by Plato or Renaissance thinkers. Instead, objectivity may have arisen in part to our evolutionary history and principles captured by processing fluency theory. Fluency theory claims that due to humans' evolution and biology, we derive a greater sense of security and pleasure from objects that are more symmetric and less complex, and are therefore more fluent for our brains to read. The easier it is for a perceiver to process the properties of a stimulus, the greater its aesthetic response will be. Instead of objectivity being a priori qualities of the world, or qualities independent from experience, we extend it to mean the universality of response in human observers. For example, symmetry may be universally preferred because of its fluent processing as a result of shared dedicated neural circuitry. In the end, they write, "Objectivity and subjectivity may be internal to the brain." So that's the objectivist view of beauty if you want to use neuroscience to back it up. Though, according to Scientific American, there is no beauty center of the brain. While the orbital frontal cortex is an important hub for pleasure coding, when subjects were given different forms of beautiful stimuli ranging from literature to visual imagery and faces, the regions were almost completely non-overlapping, which challenged the idea that a common beauty center was activated. If we take this at face value, then the beauty of a face is not the same as the beauty of a painting. Beauty is plural, diverse, embedded in the particulars of its medium. And though most of us would like to live in a world where the narrative of subjective beauty and we're all beautiful or looks don't matter actually holds water, we don't live in that world. And in fact, millions, if not billions of dollars are put into research to find out what makes someone or something universally objectively beautiful, and in this day and age, clickable, sellable, and marketable. So why is this? Why is there so much emphasis on proving that beauty is objective when most of us agree that it's subjective? Well, firstly, as most of you pointed out in your responses, there's a lot of money to be made for companies who can sell this dream of achieving beauty, who can sell trends, and invent new insecurities. As long as there's a beauty ideal that is objective and socially agreed upon, they can make you believe that you can buy your way in, either through makeup, fragrances, gym classes, clothes, surgery, etc. Secondly, knowing what appeals to consumers aesthetically means that you can move more product, get more clicks, sell more ads, and more. Understanding why we respond to beauty the way we do is important because it is one of the main motivations behind consumer spending. The beauty industry alone is worth $445 billion. Beauty is famously subjective and supposed to be intractable by science, but some of its key properties follow simple rules, said Dennis Pelly, a professor of psychology and neurosciences at NYU and co-author of the paper entitled Aesthetics. The result, according to the researchers, could help better explain what motivations drive consumer spending and decision-making. So in this capitalistic world that we live in, believing in such a thing as objective beauty and investing heavily in that idea makes monetary sense. Not to mention the fact that objective beauty and its hierarchy reinforces white supremacy, both in and outside of the US, and thus helps white people maintain their power and influence. It's what moves skin whitening products and skin bleaching procedures in South and Southeast Asia, and double eyelid surgery in South Korea and China. And in fact, double eyelid surgery or blepharoplasty was popularized by Dr. Millard, a white World War II Navy veteran, to make Korean faces more aesthetically pleasing. In their 2018 essay, Blepharoplasty as Domestication of the Asian, Constructing Korean Identities by White Hands by Angela Kim, she notes, xenophobic ideologies can be analyzed in Dr. Millard's essay Oriental Peregrinations, published in the Journal of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery in 1955, in which she writes, "We Americans are naive babes in the Asian woods, never knowing whether we are feeding the mouths of friends or loading the guns of communists. Yet we can be relatively certain that after each deformity was corrected or improved through blepharoplasty, the Korean returned home, America had won the heart of the patient, his family, and possibly even part of his village." Today, propping up white and light-skinned models, especially those who work with luxury fashion brands and beauty brands as the global standard of beauty, subtly tells everyone who's not thin and white or light-skinned that they're inferior. The word white alone came up in your answer 70 times, and thin came up 35 times, and fat came up 34 times. As one commenter put it, beauty standards in the US are based in white supremacy and patriarchy. It's a way to attach morality and explain/justify why some people are granted more access than others. I spent years as a teenager pouring hours and hours a day into learning how to be pretty and shaving, exfoliating, doing face masks, dieting. I see that all that now was a waste of my time. Being queer and not dating men, I think, grants me a lot of freedom from this because I don't have people in my daily life insisting on those standards the same way I did when I dated men. So because of white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism, beauty as objective is a very enticing and profitable idea to push. It turns beauty into this exclusive club. But in recent years, with the rise of fourth-wave feminism in the mid-2010s, corporations could no longer push white, thin beauty ideals down consumers' throats, mainly female consumers. Companies like Dove, Victoria's Secret, Always, and others were pressured into being more transparent about the confining beauty ideals and norms that they were promoting. And this led to this weird amalgamation of corporate girl boss feminism that tried to reconcile these two conflicting goals. The goal of companies wanting to make money by adhering to an objective beauty standard and patriarchal norms, and the goal to seem progressive and care about their mainly female customers who were sick and tired of fat shaming, needing to look presentable, being told they're smelly, and needing to be hairless from the neck down. During this era, we got unairbrushed photos of models from Aerie, Dove's campaign for Real Beauty, Victoria's Secret's failed progressive rebrand, and other real beauty campaigns that claim that they care about women and that their products were somehow empowering. This can be seen even today with Selena Gomez's rare beauty line that sells products entitled Positive Light Liquid Luminizer and Warm Wishes Effortless Bronzer Stick. And I guess that's not a bad thing, but to me it's just like the lesser of two evils. It reminds me of this college humor sketch that's like, let's call makeup what it is without this facade that's actually about inner beauty, or that everyone is beautiful in their own way, because if that was true, we wouldn't have to buy makeup. And I think in the end, most people see through this marketing scheme anyway. It's not about empowerment, it's about pressuring you into spending money and making men comfortable. One respondent said, I am now 27 and starting to get a few more white hairs. I've already decided that I don't want to dye my hair as I get older. This is largely to combat the misogyny towards aging women in society from both men and women, but I also don't want to put in so much extra time and money towards it. Women shouldn't feel like they have to dye their hair in order to fit in with society. Another pointed out, I feel like divesting from beauty can be achieved by tearing down beauty companies, makeup, plastic surgeons, etc. due to their insistence on helping women achieve their goals. They are businesses first and foremost, and companies that keep promises as lofty as perfection don't get repeat customers. They have to constantly change what's perfect to make sure that they have money. Also, women must band together and reject conventional beauty standards and instead do what makes us feel beautiful on an individual basis. I think the worst side effect of rebranding beauty as empowering was that it marketed adhering to feminine ideals as liberating and reduced feminism down to choices. That any choice you make, even when it upholds patriarchal beauty ideals, is inherently feminist. It reminds me of this Hugh Hefner interview from the 1960s with an angry feminist who's like, okay, if this is so empowering and liberating, then why don't you go around in bunny ears and a leotard?
The day that you are willing to come out here with a cottontail attached to your rear end.
In the end, billionaires and corporations cannot peacefully coexist with feminism because their entire existence hinges on what feminists rage against. The more we give objective beauty and ugliness credence, even if it scientifically neurologically exists, the more homogeneous we as a society will become. The meaner we'll be to those who don't fit in, and the more vain and wasteful we'll be in pursuit of this so-called ideal. So in this section, we delved into the corporate and systemic racial interests in objective beauty, and why subjective beauty or any type of just body neutrality and acceptance is so hard to push in a capitalistic society. But now let's get into how objective beauty affects us as people.
Beautiful people get it better. That's just the way it is.
We all mostly understand that we live in a world where beauty is power. Even if it's socially constructed and attractiveness is subjective, there clearly is an obvious delineation dictated by patriarchy and white supremacy of what is stereotypically attractive and what is stereotypically unattractive. A world where there's a beauty hierarchy based on looks and features, skin color and skin phenotype, face shape, nose shape, hair color, eye color, height, hair texture, thinness, fitness, etc. And people have taken this information in a myriad of ways. The first is wanting to dismantle the power that beauty has, acknowledging the unfair system and how it privileges those with money and wealth and racial privilege, and working to not buy into the system. As one respondent wrote in, I think we need to better understand the history behind this ideology of beauty as objective in order to divest ourselves from something that's been pitched to us as an innate reality, when it's actually a construction of colonialism and the glorification of whiteness. Understanding not only that we've been fed a lie, but how that happened in the first step. Then I think it requires consistent active pushback against different influences that continue to push that narrative, such as the wellness industry, entertainment, etc. One common pattern in responses was to get off social media, which thrives off of pushing one standard of beauty as just objectively better than the rest. Just the term social media came up 43 times. Look at real people. The diversity that exists in the world is so varied and unique, it can help you understand how many kinds of people can all be beautiful. Go to a nude spa, go to a gym, go to a swap meet, unplug and look at real people. Get off social media. So cliche, but so true. We're spoon-fed images of beautiful people, so we learn to think that what they have to say is just inherently more valuable. Not only are we taught to see them as more valuable based on their popularity and beauty, we're also taught to envy them and want to have what they have, even if it's not something we actually want or need. Representation, as another way we can start defamiliarizing ourselves with this objective beauty standard, was also very popular. True representation, not only on screen, but in artists, writers, and the ones who produce the art, and the muses, as a systemic rule. I think having more diverse experiences and exposure to different kinds of people in media and in real life will change things. More common representation of a variety of average people in media. Personally, for me, one way I try to take power away from beauty is trying to adhere to this idea of subjective beauty that, though seems cliche, I think can be revolutionary. Because once everyone is beautiful, no one will be. No one will inherently be able to call someone just objectively ugly or objectively better than anyone else because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. In addition, I try not to judge people by their appearance at all. You might not find someone beautiful, but that doesn't mean that they're a bad person or not worth getting to know or that they can't be beautiful to someone else. A lot of it is trying to undo this thing we learn as kids that evil people are ugly and good people are beautiful. Real people aren't cartoon characters. Undoing your own unconscious bias is hard, but it's something that has to actively be done if we're ever going to create a more just society. And as one commenter wrote, people will always hold their own biases. Biases will always be around, though education goes a long way in minimizing it all. Plus maturity too. I also try to practice self-acceptance. There are of course things I would want to change about myself, but even so, I just try not to give my outward appearance too much thought. It is what it is kind of thing. Like one commenter wrote, there's so much more to my life outside of how I look. Beauty is not something I actively pursue, but of course as I get older and the pressure to be presentable and look more adult while also not having any signs of aging gets to me. I'm a human, and as you get older, especially if you're a woman, it does get harder to accept the fact that you're past your prime or whatever, or that you're not stereotypically beautiful to society, or will never fit that current ideal. But in general, I think a big step is to just acknowledge that outer beauty and how you and others look on the outside isn't everything. Don't judge a book by its cover, especially if someone's marginalized by white, thin, ableist beauty standards in some way. Another way some people take this information that beauty is power is becoming extremely bitter and doubling down on this idea that beauty is objective and beautiful men and women are their sworn enemies. I already made a video about the nerd to fascist pipeline, but this is like a big part of it. Many men, and even some women, after realizing that pretty privilege exists and that more attractive people are perceived in a better light than those who aren't, take it out on these individuals rather than on the larger capitalist and racist system. In pop culture, this can be found on one of the most successful US TV sitcoms of the 21st century, The Big Bang Theory, with the character of Penny, which I also made a video about, where the writers on the show make the male characters neg her for everything from her mannish big hands to her fake blonde hair.
The majority of people have dark hair. Even you at one time.
The writers either consciously or unconsciously hate that women like Penny, portrayed by Kaley Cuoco, are attractive and therefore have power to choose who they date and who they partner. Whether done just to be funny or with intent, it doesn't really matter, the impact is the same. If you're a woman like Penny who has pretty privilege, you need to be knocked down a few pegs. And it's not just angry men, but some angry women too. And though I guess you could argue that the show is critiquing the men, that doesn't really work when the men always get to have their cake and eat it too. They get to participate in misogyny while also still getting the girl. The male nerds on the show also get to participate in the hypocrisy of subjective beauty and objective ugliness. They can convince the girls to like them because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, give them a chance, don't judge a book by its cover, while also seeing the women as objectively beautiful or objectively ugly. In the writers' minds, women like Penny should be shamed for their beauty and how it gets them free things because it means they have the power to say no, and they shouldn't have that power. Women like her should just open their legs and settle for them.
You're gonna throw away a great girl like Bernadette because you're holding out for some ridiculous fantasy?
Hey, just because you settled doesn't mean I have to.
If The Big Bang Theory was made today, it would just be called Oops, All Incels. Some angry men and some angry women hate conventionally beautiful women because they believe that they have too much power without realizing how patriarchy and objective beauty hurts women and men simultaneously. Rather than being angry at the white patriarchal system that emasculates men who don't live up to this impossible ideal of masculinity and shames women for not being feminine and submissive enough, they direct that anger at the women, who they believe are denying men their God-given right to have sex whenever they want to, and for women, denying them the same advantages that being pretty affords. But honestly, this type of rhetoric just doesn't make any sense to me, speaking purely woman to woman. Because sure, later we'll concede that attractive people do have some advantages in the workplace. There's also the halo effect, how attractive people are more positively perceived. But ultimately, following this line of thinking is extremely misogynistic and dangerous. If we truly believe that there is an objective beauty standard and that some women are just able to get by on their looks and we should hate on them for that, it also simultaneously implies that pretty women deserve to be assaulted insulted and that ugly women can't be because they're just objectively ugly. It reminds me of the sex offender joke from The Office where Phyllis is flashed by a stranger and Michael says, "Did they even see Pam?" As if sexual assault has anything to do with attractiveness. And it's also hypocritical because, okay, so pretty women do suffer more misogyny and violence than ugly women. Shouldn't you be happier ugly? Or are attractive women the devil and the reason you're single? Which is it? And then there are the men who have become hyper-radicalized by forced diversity in ads and video games and movies that work to push beauty as subjective and defamiliarize us with what beauty is. The men who have become incels and hyper-radicalized online and off by what they deem woke media and feminist BS. So let's talk about it. Before we get into incel territory, let's talk about why some men may prefer to define beauty as objective and why some women may prefer the subjective framework. Throughout history, in most societies and cultures, women were and still are the subject or muse for beauty. Whether it be the Greek goddess of beauty Aphrodite, Chang'e, the moon goddess, Vermeer's The Girl with the Pearl Earring, Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, the Egyptian goddess of fertility Isis, Ishtar, Mesopotamia's Queen of Heaven, or Iracema, the titular indigenous character of 19th century Brazilian novelist José de Alencar, the beauty and power of women has been subject to centuries of contemplation. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, nor means that men aren't also the subject or muse for beauty, but rather that this becomes problematic when being a beautiful object for men and the larger society to judge, look at, and control becomes a woman's only purpose and thus confines her to certain roles and statuses in life. As one commenter wrote, "As a woman, I've always felt as if beauty controls my life. I feel like I'm not valued or even treated with respect sometimes for not fitting into the Eurocentric beauty standards. That's why sometimes I feel the need to hide and not go out as much after years of feeling insecure." Another wrote, "Honestly, I hate beauty standards and beauty hierarchies. I don't give a shit about beauty trends and I only get treated well because I'm rather kind of pretty for a fat girl. And honestly, beauty standards and hierarchies are one of the reasons why I'm very insecure about my looks." Today in the US at least, women are still primarily seen by men and at other times by other women as objects to merely look at and judge and get visual pleasure from. This can be illustrated in many micro interactions of men telling women to smile more or to make themselves look more presentable, or even in the sociocultural belief we have that if a woman isn't wearing makeup, that she's given up, either on herself or on finding a male partner, rather than just not participating in the beauty industry or just not feeling like putting on makeup on that particular day in that particular moment. And because women are subjected to countless double standards and told that they're the ones in society who have to be beautiful, while a man's life doesn't hinge on beauty alone, they're usually the ones who have more opinions about beauty and take action against their confining social role. In my personal experience, I think women tend to lean more towards this idea that beauty is subjective because they're the ones who have to deal with this very narrow definition of what beauty is, whereas men have a somewhat wider variety of roles in society they can take on that doesn't revolve around looks or how young they are or how hairless they are, if they have to wear makeup, heels, show skin, etc. Not to mention that men actually benefit from objective beauty in that they dictate the social and political and cultural norms in the US at least, and hold more political power and corporate power. They can dictate how women should present, and even if they have the right to choose what to do with their own bodies. And some men who are radicalized and see women as their enemy like this objective framework because it means they have the ability to bully women who, to them, are just factually ugly. These kinds of men might also see themselves as ugly, but they at least still have power over the women they deem undesirable bimbos. However, that doesn't mean that men don't have their own beauty standards that can be just as confining. I mean, just look at what a group of 500 men in 2014 thought the ideal man should look like. Plus the added pressure to get married, to have a lot of sex, and make a lot of money, and be a leader, all while having to be emotionally stoic. It's exhausting and it's wrong. But rather than also adhering to this idea that beauty is subjective and we can all be beautiful in our own way, and rejecting traditional masculinity, some men decide to double down and internalize this rhetoric that beauty is objective. Why is this? Why do some people, men in particular, vocalize online how beauty is measurable and a real tangible thing that you either have or don't? And why do they find solace in this? And before we go on, I want to say that it's not just men who believe this. Some women believe this too, as mentioned in the previous section. There's not this hard binary that all women believe in subjective beauty and all men believe in objective beauty. This is just a conclusion I came to based on my own research. Feel free to state your own opinions down in the comments below. But in my opinion, some men prefer beauty as objective objective because it not only gives them the power to continue to judge and control women, but also male objective beauty standards gives them an end goal that if they reach, they'll finally be happy, or at least they think that. Not to mention how a lot of white male incels are also white supremacist fascists who thrive on this idea that white is right and are objectively superior to any other race. And though objective beauty may make these men depressed because they're not stereotypically beautiful, it doesn't matter because they can just beautify themselves through looks maxing. In its lightest form, it's just taking care of yourself like personal hygiene, skincare, grooming, etc. And at most, it's going to the gym, working on your body, and maybe getting plastic surgery. At its heaviest form, it's hard maxing. But honestly, from what I've read, that's more of like a meme, like joking that you're gonna bash your jaw against the wall to make it more prominent. Like obviously no one's actually going to do that, but they're talking about how they believe that men with larger jaws get more women. Other hard maxing procedures are real though, like breaking your legs in hopes that you'll gain a few inches, or purposefully not eating to lose weight. Like, that's distressing. It's important to note that cishet men are suffering mentally, and many who identify as incels suffer from mental illnesses and eating disorders and depression. And they do have legitimate grievances, but that also doesn't make it okay to cause other people, specifically marginalized groups, harm. Being a raging racist misogynist online and in your personal life isn't a mental disorder. Yes, single white cishet men are hurting, but many of them are also victimizing themselves without taking responsibility for their actions and privileged place in society. Not to mention, they're ironically upholding this objective beauty standard so they can hold on to this power that they have over women and racial minorities without realizing or without caring that these harmful standards are oppressing them as well. To conclude this section, I think some men just really want to believe that beauty is undoubtedly objective because it gives them some sort of hope and end goal that they can reach, and it legitimizes their struggle. Because if beauty can be measured, if it is something that is attainable with surgeries and other beautifying processes, that means that there's some sort of end in sight to their suffering. And for men, beauty being based on logic makes even more sense, at least to me, because they're brought up as the objective default, socialized as more rational compared to illogical women who base everything on their erratic emotions. They find solace that they will eventually be rewarded and be able to finally obtain sexual success, as long as they continue to entertain this idea that beauty is something that you either have or you don't, and as long as there's a clear set of steps to follow to reach it. And honestly, I personally find that to be really sad. I think out of the two options, believing that outer beauty is in the eye of the beholder is so much more worthwhile because then no one has any power over you. But then I guess that's what's also unappealing about this line of thinking, because it would mean giving up the power that you have as a cishet white guy. By believing that some women and men are just undoubtedly mid or are objectively ugly and that beauty is this complex puzzle that they've cracked the code to, they can still uphold this illusion of power, because if it was that simple, that beauty is something that we decide for ourselves, then they would have no one to blame for their unhappiness but themselves. So far, we've talked about why believing in objective beauty is dangerous and how believing that beauty is subjective and that we're all already beautiful and ugly in our own way can be a radical way of thinking in a world that constantly tries to capitalize off of our insecurities to keep us buying. But in the end, are incels and femcels right? Don't pretty people have it better? Being below average looking has serious drawbacks, and therefore, beauty is clearly objective because I don't get to experience those very real privileges. For example, the halo effect disproportionately benefits physically attractive people. The halo effect means that if there's one good trait in a person, then you start to associate a bunch of other good traits with them as well, said neuropsychologist Dr. Judy Ho to Vice for an article entitled "Why Life is Easier for Attractive People." This explains why people tend to assume that conventionally beautiful people are also smart, funny, or talented. This can be perfectly illustrated with Susan Boyle, who was assumed to not be any good at singing because she wasn't conventionally attractive. And as some of you wrote, one way to start taking power away from outer beauty is to stop linking the idea of inner beauty with outer beauty. We've long held this idea that beautiful people are talented and have good personalities. We need more media that shows non-conventionally attractive people who are also talented and nice, and not have it be a nice guy or nice girl narrative. Dr. Judy Ho also pointed out how looking good sometimes has the opposite effect, especially for women. People might say, for example, that because a woman is so pretty, she must be shallow or not so smart. But is this halo effect and finding people just objectively more attractive than others just part of our biology and there's no way to go against it? After all, grouping positive traits together, assuming pretty people are also good people, is just another way the human mind tries to make sense of the world. People make these assumptions, Ho says, because their brains are constantly looking for shortcuts to understand its surroundings. When they see an attractive person, they're going to say, okay, that attractive person is also probably nice and smart and has a lot of friends and is popular. So that's it then. The hierarchy is real and thus beautiful people suck and we should all be angry at them and try our best to conform and achieve this objective beauty standard. But here's where it gets more complex. Though there is a beauty hierarchy and standard and ideal, let's not conflate that with objective beauty. Yes, white, thin, conventionally attractive, non-disabled, cishet people have it better and are looked upon more favorably and have some sort of privilege, though that may vary for women specifically who may seem mean, shallow, or dumb for also being beautiful when that's not fair, but that doesn't mean that they're just objectively 100% factually more beautiful than other people. And the more we give this idea legitimacy that white, thin, cishet, able-bodied people are the ideal, the closer we get to eugenics. As one commenter pointed out, it seems like beauty standards are beginning to border on eugenics, and this is an alarming trend. There are forums where men rate women's attractiveness according to minute measurements and proportions of their facial features, etc. They are trying to make a science of something that is inherently subjective and culturally relative. There is a real beauty hierarchy that's socially and culturally imposed upon us, but that doesn't mean that it's objectively true and just something that can't be changed or that has been the case throughout history. Rubenesque women used to be the beauty ideal. In the 1950s, US women with short hair used to be the standard. Bound feet in China used to be deemed as beautiful. Wide noses, lucky moles, big thick earlobes in ancient China were signs of good fortune and wealth. Men in Western Europe used to wear heels and hair bows. During the 1700s, European and American men used to walk around in stockings with tri-corner hats, and hats used to be so in vogue that the phrase "I'll eat my hat" used to be common vernacular. I could go on, but you get the gist. Just because there is a beauty standard doesn't mean that anyone is objectively more beautiful than anyone else, nor does it mean that anyone is objectively uglier than anyone else for either fitting or not fitting in to said standard. And I personally do believe this and argue for this way of thinking, because if we do truly believe that there are just factually uglier and more beautiful people outside of this white patriarchal ableist framework, then it just leads to a very dark place that some people deserve to be hidden away for simply not looking aesthetically pleasing. Because honestly, most of us in the world are below average looking, and that's okay. And we shouldn't be punished or bullied for that. A harder pill to swallow is that we shouldn't take our anger out on people who fit into this beauty standard or ideal, but rather on the system itself that created this absurd objective hierarchy to begin with. Or else you risk turning into an angry incel that hates all women, or should I say females, because of their perceived value in the sex market. Though I do understand why people get angry or frustrated with this line of thinking. A lot of the time, our personal experiences with beautiful people as average or below average looking people, specifically as people of color, is usually negative and has to do with racially motivated bullying by white people. So there's a lot of valid resentment there. Being surrounded by too many white people as a kid is one of the reasons why a lot of kids of color grow up thinking they're inferior to their white peers when they're just as beautiful. As some of you wrote in, I grew up as an ugly kid in a predominantly white school, and people would insult my appearance to my face, and it led to my awful self-esteem. One day, the same kids that insulted me started complimenting my features. Maybe I got a confidence boost, but what's the point if one day my face will eventually stop being a trend? And it doesn't really help how the world, the internet, companies, etc. keep on inventing new insecurities. Beauty hierarchies fascinate me because, as a biracial woman of color, I never quite know how people are going to perceive me. I know that I'm generally perceived as attractive by most people, but I've struggled with feeling second place to white women for a while due to where I grew up. And as someone who is neurodivergent, I have autism, ADHD, and OCD, I find that more people are willing to look over those aspects of who I am because of my attractiveness. I'm in a better environment surrounded by better people now. However, sometimes I still worry that people only want me for my body. And before we go on, I just want to say I think it's really telling how we need to bring out this defense of beauty is subjective when talking about anyone other than cis het thin white people, when in reality, they're again just as beautiful. And I'm not here to tell you how to personally deal with your experiences with bullying, racial, ableist, fatphobic, or otherwise, but I do want to say that there are legitimate reasons why it's hard to not remain angry at stereotypically attractive cishet thin white people. As one of those kids who was surrounded by too many white girls growing up, it really does affect your sense of self. In all, we should work more on undoing our own biases and take down this hierarchy rather than directing our anger at individuals, and start valuing inner beauty in ourselves and others more than what's on the inside. And I understand that that's an extremely hard thing to do. As many of you said, you have no idea if this is even possible in such a looks-obsessed society that's been subsumed with social media and constant comparison. Unfortunately, I think inner beauty will never be more valued than outer beauty, because our society works visually. However, we men are a lot more shallow than women, so change could start there. Not to mention that, as one person said, I don't even really like the term inner beauty because it implies positive traits need to be tied to beauty in order to be valuable, and it removes all detail of what traits we're actually talking about. And that's valid and fair. What do we mean when talking about inner beauty? I guess what we mean are traits like empathy, kindness, understanding, open-mindedness, etc. that help us look beyond what's on the outside, valuing people's actions, beliefs, and who they are as people rather than if they're attractive. Stop praising kids, specifically girls, on if they're attractive or not. Stop shaming kids for being ugly or overweight, which surprisingly a lot of parents do. One person wrote, "We need to stop constantly praising kids for their appearance. The number one compliment kids hear is, 'You're so pretty or handsome.' It reinforces this notion that it's their most important trait, which they carry to adulthood, and the cycle continues. Instead, foster their interest in things other than beauty or thinness and appearance. Valuing inner beauty means undoing our biases on an individual basis. Many of you suggested getting offline or at least off social media sites and instead focusing on the people around you and remembering how who you are on the inside matters, not just your Instagram profile metrics. As one person wrote in, "I don't give a shit how anyone else looks or if they're different from me or not attractive. If we're friends, then that's that. Not having the preset in your mind that tells you this person isn't attractive and that person is, that I find naturally develops from being on social media and sways your personal opinions is great." A second wrote, "I feel like the idea that somebody's personality can make or break how attractive they are is overlooked. And I know sometimes it's easier to just stay angry at the world and at this power imbalance, to wallow and say I'm never going to be beautiful enough, why should I work on myself when all that matters is how I look on the outside. But I think it's up to us as individuals to look past the bullshit, to take away the power that physical beauty holds, and to just, as many of you said, be kinder to one another and see each other for what's on the inside, as cheesy as that sounds. I think it's something we need to hear every now and again because it's so easy to forget.
Best embrace the suck.
So before I end this video, I think it's important to note that divesting from capitalism and this never-ending trend cycle is different from expressing yourself or wanting to look nice and feel good about yourself. You should express yourself however you want to, and just because you wear makeup doesn't make you vain. Caring about your appearance isn't wrong. And I get why we decide to aestheticize our social media and dating profiles, because the more beautiful they are, the more attention they'll get. And when the internet is the new third place and everything is visual, it places an even bigger importance on looks and how attractive you are. Being beautiful and desirable online has never been so profitable and so important. But as many of you also pointed out, it's more important to be kind than to have a perfect feed. In all, yes, there's a beautiful white thin cishet beauty ideal and hierarchy, but no, it isn't the objective standard for what beautiful can and should be. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and the more we give that credence and legitimacy, the more we can undo white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy. We're all beautiful may sound cliche, but if we truly believe it, then we'll live in a more just and less mean and judgmental society. Then if we continue to push this rhetoric that beauty and ugliness is fact. Because again, once we're all beautiful, no one will be. And we can finally just see each other as we are. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into why objective beauty is so heavily pushed and how we can work to make beauty what we want it to be. If you like this video, please give it a like, subscribe, comment, become a patron, and thank you so much to all my patrons who made this video possible and everyone who answered my survey. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.